Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to get started. This is the July webinar from the ATD New York City chapter. My name is Todd Tauber. I am the co-chair of the webinar committee here. And today's topic is Learning Analytics, Moving Beyond Metrics. Our presenter today is Andy Tanner. Andy is the leader of the Regis company's Learning Analytics practice, which is dedicated to advancing learning measurement effectiveness through advanced analytic strategies and techniques. Before joining Regis, Andy was a data and analytics consultant for a prominent multinational professional services firm. He was assigned to multiple leadership roles, including the firm's global analytics and talent development leader. Our program today comes with support from the Regis company. The Regis company is a talent development consulting firm whose mission is to create great thinkers and leaders through understanding, changing, and analyzing mental models. The Regis company works with Fortune 500 companies across the globe to develop innovative leadership development solutions that combine assessments, simulations, and learning analytics in order to ensure behavioral change and business impact. Before we get started, I just want to call your attention to the chat box. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in there. We'll answer them as we go through or at the end, depending on where they fit. And with that, I will turn it over to Andy to get us started. Andy?
Great. Thanks, Todd. And welcome, everyone. Really appreciate you joining today. We have a really exciting topic to share, or at least it's exciting to me. But I truly think you'll find this really valuable and hopefully immediately applicable to your organization. So today I'm going to be sharing some perspective on data analytics, but we very purposely titled it Moving Beyond Metrics. The reason is because in most cases when analytics are discussed, there's a tendency of most individuals to immediately think technology, and then their eyes quickly glaze over. Joking aside, while technology is an important component of analytics, the true value is in the business outcome. So in the case of learning and development, organizations are looking for answers around their programs. Are they effective? Are we seeing an impact in the field? Are we getting financial ROI? Now, these are real business questions that organizations would all like answered, but most cannot, or at least effectively. So now let's bring analytics into the conversation, but let's do it in context of our business challenge. So here's the business challenge. 22% of organizations rarely or never track progress towards strategic initiatives. So basically 1 in 5 don't even attempt to link to their key business initiatives. If we click down another layer, we see that almost 60% of organizations have trouble connecting learning to business outcomes. So for those that at least try, the majority are not effective. And for the other 40%, my observations and experience have shown that the connection is really imperfect. Now, this has been a long-running issue, but in the last few years, as big data has become prominent in our everyday lives, there's been a raised awareness of the power of analytics in human capital and L&D. So what we saw is 75% of organizations actually rate analytics as important or very important to their strategies. So there is certainly a strong awareness that analytics can assist with this business challenge. But look at this next statistic. Only 5% have the analytics capabilities to deliver. So the bottom line is analytics will be a key enabler to solving this business issue, but organizations will need to put a much stronger strategic focus on developing the related capabilities and practices. So now let's talk about how we can actually achieve this. So moving into the solution. Solution is what we call advanced learning intelligence. And this is a systematic approach for tying learning to business performance and outcomes through the use of advanced analytics techniques. So notice that I'm not leading with the analytics piece. We're leading with, again, the business problem and actually using the analytics techniques to enable that, or enable the solution, rather. So the stages will probably look familiar to all of you. The difference you'll see is in the integration of analytics, which is the key to actually making the model work. So the standard that Kirkpatrick developed in the 50s is what almost all organizations follow, and rightfully so. The challenge is, as we saw in the previous statistics, is in the operationalizing it. So the first step of the process is to define. Now, this should be happening regardless of the use of analytics, but many organizations skip past this or don't perform it effectively. So with the introduction of analytics, it's critical that we establish this definition, because this basically sets the foundation or the blueprint from which the analytics models are built. So this will provide the dimensions for every level of analysis, including the link to business impacts, as I'll show in a few examples going forward here. So the diagnose stage will actually utilize the program consumption, course evaluation, and learner demographic data to get an initial snapshot of your program. So this is data that you probably all have and use or get in probably reporting format today. This is the same data that we can use to really do a full diagnostic of the program. So it'll identify things like capability gaps, demographic patterns, and target program development areas that will provide the greatest return. So certainly a step behind some of the static reports that most organizations are getting today. So the next stage, stage 2, focuses in on the learning data to determine if the target capabilities and learning objectives are actually being achieved. So analytics enables you to take that a step further and identify patterns related to performance gaps and performance benchmarks. So it does a unique drill down into every element of that data. And that's, again, through the integration of both the learning data as well as what we gathered in stage 1, the diagnostic data, consumption data, and the evaluation data. So it starts integrating all of those to start identifying performing multidimensional analysis. So learning data can come in the form of exams, facilitator evaluations, and even e-learning logs. However, the ideal set of learning data is from technology-delivered learning simulation. And the reason being is every click in a sim is a data point, and the dynamic paths and scoring algorithms provide for a high level of precision in identifying relevant patterns. And again, I'll give some examples of how that actually works. But ultimately, the outputs provide customized development areas for learners, but also aggregated feedbacks for departments, geographies, business units, and really all across the organization. All right, so jumping to stage 3, transform behaviors. This really starts transitioning from the learning environment to the field and analyzes learning transfer through behavioral assessment and field performance. So the analytics will also provide insights into environmental blockers, such as do your people have the right tools? Do staff have an adequate level of coaching and mentoring? Is the formal process methodology that's being used designed effectively? So it really becomes more strategic at this stage, again, taking learning to the next level and starting to get into business insights. So jumping to stage 4, growing the business. So as we jump from stage 3 to stage 4, we're taking all of that information and data that we gathered over the first 3 stages. So this allowed us to identify target areas for our program in stage 1, measure the learning effectiveness in stage 2, assess the transfer and operational impact in stage 3. But now in stage 4, we can use all of this to measure the change in business metrics. Capabilities are tied to operational drivers. Operational drivers are tied to business metrics. And then transitively, we can correlate capabilities and learning to true business impact. So now that we went through the stages, let's get into some live examples to help bring this to life. So diagnose example. So in this scenario, let's say the organization has a consulting leadership program that's been running for 8 years. Some of the courses in this program have over $1 million invested in them. And the program was really designed to target the following components as they were hypothesized to have the greatest outcomes on the business: engagement economics, client values, teamwork, and innovative thinking. Now, the organization would like to understand, are these skills actually being transferred to the learners in the business, and what is the true business impact? So we pulled some learner consumption and evaluation data. We also conducted a brief automated survey. And the analysis showed some really valuable insights. An analysis of the consumption data identified that a recommended e-learning for managers project management course was only taken by 30 people over the last 8 years. Now, this is the only course in the program that covers teaming and mentoring skills, and also turned out to be the highest rated as we looked at the evaluation data among all learners. So the lack of consumption, may be a factor in some of the performance gaps the organization is experiencing. Now, further analysis showed that Leadership Bootcamp course designed to train on teamwork, economics, and client values was highly consumed, as expected. However, the evaluation data showed a large gap in the transfer of client values. Now, through a text analysis, we dug a little deeper, and through a text analysis performed on the evaluation comments within the evaluation data, we learned that this was driven by a lack of focus on some base skills, client communications and presentation, but also illustrated some deep behavioral gaps as well as some gaps in the course experience. A subsequent survey of executives conducted indicated that many company resources have not gained the required skills or experience to be staffed on priority account projects, and they believe that at least half of these instances could have led to a new project. So based on the average revenue for a priority project, there could have been another $6 million in revenue for the organization. So what this diagnostic is really doing in a very quick way is providing some great early insights, some that could be focused on and hopefully remediated right away, but others that will likely need some more strategic remediation. But there's also an initial tie to financial returns, which will help the go-forward business case. So using, again, some data that most organizations are probably already collecting, we can get some much deeper insights and also establish the business case for subsequent stages. So now let's fast forward and assume that the organization redesigned their leadership bootcamp to address some of these findings. So here's the scenario. The organization integrated a 2.5-day learning simulation into the bootcamp designed in various regions have attended. So our stage 2 analysis provided some really surprising insights. We targeted multiple behavioral dimensions associated with a few key mental model shifts. The first round analysis showed that, once again, the client values dimension was much lower than the others. As we dig a little deeper into the round, we see that one of the primary activities was a team staffing exercise designed to drive thinking towards cross-functional thinking and teaming. The results, however, showed that executives favored the staffing model that drove higher project budgets rather than cross-functional teaming, which decreased client satisfaction rather than the increasing the client satisfaction that would be driven by the cross-functional teaming element. So this behavior did improve throughout the sim, but it gave us some insights into some of the pre-program performance gaps that we initially identified. And it wasn't the lower ranks that were driving it. So now let's transition to actual field behaviors. So in stage 3, as you recall, this is designed to ensure learning transfer is optimized and environmental blockers are addressed. So using some operational data like client satisfaction, learner evaluations, and project financials directly from the field, we evaluated learner performance. So this analysis showed that subsequent to our rollout of the Enhanced Manager Program in the Northeast and the Southeast regions where we initially deployed it, we observed outstanding performances on the majority of projects, so that's good news. However, looking a little deeper, our teams in DC continued to struggle. So through further evaluation, we determined that while learning transfer was effective, as shown through the learning data we had gathered in the previous stage, they lacked executive support in the field, which ultimately led to decreased client satisfaction. So this finding has been presented to leadership, and they have decided to redesign their operating protocols to ensure executives are at least 10% utilized in all projects. So what this has done is taken a key, both learning objectives and business objectives, analyze that a little deeper, and determine that while the sim actually increased the effectiveness for learners in this particular space, there was an environmental blocker that needed to be addressed. So while the analysis along stage 1 and stage 2 give a strong indication of performance and learner effectiveness in both the classroom and the field, we still want to show some ties to business impact, which leads us into stage 4. So for stage 4 analysis, we performed a few analyses, including a margin impact trend. So this showed improvement in all regions except one, which had a slight decrease. Now, 3 of the business units showed significant increases. In talking with executives, they indicated that while other business factors probably certainly came into play, the skill advancement acquired through the new program played a significant role, including add-on projects, improved client satisfaction, and improved client financials. Now, remember back to the diagnostics, where we established a baseline, which served as the business case for program investment. We've now proven the hypothesis by linking all of the stages. This analysis by itself likely would have drawn a lot of skepticism on the link to the learning program, but when we actually staged this all the way from the diagnostic into the learning environment, into the behaviors in the field, there was much better adoption and actual support of these findings. So let's do a quick recap of the stages and their focus. So the first stage, again, was Diagnose. Now the focus and really the benefit of this stage was ensuring that the learning program is aligned with the business performance while also identifying early insights that can provide some immediate results. The next stage, stage 2, which was change thinking, is designed to analyze your program, monitor and measure the advancement of learner capabilities in alignment with the key business objectives. The third stage, transforming behaviors. So establishes if the learning program results are actually translating into the organization and also identifying opportunities for advancing your people and your business. And then finally, growing the business, ensuring that your stakeholders are seeing business results from your investment while also identifying future growth opportunities. So let's talk a little bit how we actually get started. First stage, really what we're calling stage 0, get agreement on the KPIs and their value before going into design, certainly execution. Define what good thinking, mental models, and good behaviors look like. And then link that desired thinking and behaviors and skill sets to specific KPIs. That establishes the foundation as well as the blueprint, again, for the analytics models. Start with the data you have and analyze. Don't just report. So what I mean here is that right now we actually get a lot of metrics, we get a lot of reports. But actually drill into that. Start looking at the data across the multiple dimensions and seeing if you can identify patterns and trends. And a lot of the data that you'll use, certainly in the first stage, already exists today. It's just really analyzing it in a different format. Work through all the stages and ROI will follow. So a lot of organizations, again, are trying to jump right from learning correlation to return on investment, and oftentimes skipping these stages in the middle. Making that link is very difficult. Again, going through the stages will allow you to not only identify some very target areas for development, but then also establish yourself to deliver and report on the strong ROI. And then develop your analytics function and capabilities. As we said on the onset, most organizations would really like to make that link. They believe analytics is a key enabler to do that, but really don't have the capabilities to do such. So here, move fast, but don't rush. This takes a while to establish the skill sets, the infrastructure, the ultimate analytics models. But there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that you can basically establish and get some quick returns on. So I know that was a quick walkthrough of some examples and some stages, but we did that very purposefully because we wanted to make sure that we hit on the high-level components, but then also gave everyone an opportunity to really take that in and open it up for any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much, Andy. That was a great presentation and really fascinating stuff. While we're waiting for the audience to post some more questions, just real quickly, I want to remind everybody when you're done, please make sure to fill out the evaluation form. I've got a question for you to get started, Andy, which is, these are great tips in terms of getting started, but is there any groundwork that needs to be in place? You know, what are the sort of basic systems, process, people that you need to make this stuff work?
Yeah, just from a people, and I always think about it in the people, process, technology dimension. So there are a lot of, and increasingly so, a lot of resources that are being together the baseline analytic skill sets that really would enable a lot of these analyses. You know, you don't have to jump to hiring data scientists to be able to start getting return on these programs. So that would be my first tip as far as who you bring in. But there's also, on the people side, a business element to this. So starting to change the thinking about how you use data and how you use reports is also something that, you know, I would recommend to make sure that the end user is actually comfortable with using these types of reports and interpreting them. On the technology side, there's a lot of great technology out there already. As I mentioned, most of the data that you'll need to do these probably exists already. It's just putting it in the correct format and doing the analysis. And then a lot of the examples that I showed were using you know, visualization tools such as Tableau or Spotfire. Those are actually designed for end user use. So you can actually do interactive dashboards and drill down. So, and then ultimately, you know, making sure that on the process side that there are very tight processes, and this goes back to the define stage that I mentioned, making sure you're clear on what you're measuring against, what's the ultimate process for getting that data and reporting it, and then making sure that you know what you're going to do once you get those results. We've seen a lot of organizations that was a major pitfall, is that they may collect a lot of data and have a lot of good information, but ultimately don't have, say, the governance, the structure to actually move anything forward.
So that's a good segue to the second question here, which is about sort of ownership of the process. Is this something that's typically owned by the learning or talent development team, or is this something that belongs somewhere else in the organization? And if so, what is the role for the learning and talent development professional?
Yeah. So what I've found is that really the L&D department should be the owners of this, and ultimately drive the business to be the end user. So what I mean there is there's certainly a lot of process involved in, you know, creating the analyses and generating and distributing the reports, and that's what I mentioned earlier as that governance, and keeping that central, and then really getting the adoption from the various business units is really the best way to drive that. Once it starts going out into, you know, what I would call the different silos, then you lose that consistency, and then it becomes very difficult, especially when you get into stage 3 and stage 4, to tie those results back to the overall strategic objectives of the business.
Okay, great. And I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. One here is you know, your getting started list is a good sort of roadmap, but are there any sort of common roadblocks on that road that people should be aware of or ready for? Are there 3 things to watch out for to make sure that you've got in place before you get started?
Yeah, so the data, and this is true across all domains that I've worked in, is truly understanding what's available and how do we acquire that data in an efficient way, and also ensure that it's quality, right? So there's various source systems, certainly as you get into the advanced stages that you'll be pulling from, but largely a lot of this information could come from an LMS. But working with your IT team within the L&D department, establishing kind of the protocols about getting data, what data you're going to need, how that all links before execution begins is something that I found to be really critical. And again, this is true across any domain. So data is probably one of the first areas of focus. The governance, again, so making sure that we know who are the stakeholders, who are the end users, and ultimately what are their desires, what are their needs, what do they want to measure. So establishing that up front, and then that'll actually drive, again, your defined stage and the blueprint that you set forward. And then finally, making sure that when you get results, that there is some governance around what do we do with that. As some of these examples showed, you're going to certainly be able to get some information that drives a strong business case. But establishing who's involved in determining what are some of the go-forward actions and how do we actually get things implemented is a key thing to set in place before you actually start driving everything forward.
Okay. One last question. On a, I guess, more personal note, we do these obviously for professional development for the ATD New York City chapter community. Are there any particular resources, frameworks, tools, books, articles, research that you think are particularly useful or insightful for helping people who want to dig deeper into this?
Well, there's none in particular. There's a lot out there on the internet about about data analytics in general. And as you start getting into there's organizations like TDWI that really get into technical aspects of analytics. But I would say, starting with just some of the key components around learning measurement, most may have already got into the Kirkpatrick model, but that really is a great base to understand how learning measurement happens. The analytics behind it are, I would say, the technical aspects are less important to start with. But as your organization starts to develop the function, there is a lot out there, even in areas like Coursera, where you can get into any course that you would absolutely need for technical advancement. But certainly, I think starting with just some of the more basic learning measurement capabilities and then moving into the technical aspects is probably the best way to go. Now, I mentioned, of course, SIMS and mental models and behavioral change quite a bit throughout. Our CEO, Mike Vaughn, has some published white papers, TED Talks, and even a book out there. So I would certainly recommend looking into that for the stage 2 and ultimately stage 3.
That's great stuff. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. So unless anybody else has last call for questions, otherwise, I think we'll just wrap it up here. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to email Andy or his colleague Marshall. Their contact information will be up in just a second. We'll leave that up for a minute. And we hope that you found today's webinar valuable. Sure. Go ahead.
Marshall here. Just to add, there is a People Analytics conference that Wharton runs. So for those here in the Northeast, I've seen a couple of really great articles. I saw Laszlo Bach and Dan Pink had some quotes there. So it attracts a pretty impressive group of learning professionals that are focused on data. It looks like the next one's March 30th through 31st, 2017. So if anyone decides to go, tell us. Maybe we'll see you down there.
Great. Thanks, Marshall. I think that's the last question we've got. We hope you found today's program valuable. We do these every month, so hope to see you again on a future one. We'll be sending out invites for the next one in a couple of weeks, but in the meantime, thanks everybody for attending, and have a great day. Actually, one last question. Would it be possible to get the information in an email? We'll make sure that the deck goes out in the email to all participants.
And we'll also make the recording available on the ATD website as well.